okay, that's a big TAM. It's a big market. It's like trillions of dollars, you know, truly unfathomable size. So I know if I'm playing inside of that, I can adjust and pivot and maybe find a different business if the first one doesn't work out.
You're obviously doing amazing at it. Some of the famous clients that use your product are companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Cursor, just to mention a few.
Software engineering up until like about 18 months ago was nearly identical to me to what I did 10 years ago. I think what's happening with AI is this huge leap forward. It's this huge transformation.
I think one of the differences that I would say is between these pre-seed, Y Combinator, early startups to what you're describing is that the feeling of product market fit. How do you define it, and how do you know that you have it?
When you have product market fit, it's kind of like the Mario star, where you're like a little bit untouchable. Product market fit lets you
Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of The Merge, our podcast here brought to you live from the CodeRabbit office in San Francisco. I'm very excited today because I'm here with Michael Grinich, one of the founders of WorkOS, which is a very exciting company used by many global players, as we will learn in just a second. And with that being said, Michael, welcome to the pod. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, obviously, in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco, your name rings a bell. But maybe for those people listening and seeing you for the first time, could you explain us a little bit about your background? How did you come to WorkOS? And, what's the short brief?
Yeah, I'll tell you the short version. So, gosh, it makes me feel old now. So like 10 or 15 years ago or so, I was an undergrad student at MIT and dropped out of school for about 6 months to come out to San Francisco. And I interned at this little startup called Dropbox. And Dropbox at the time was like 30 or 40, maybe 50 people in an office just down on Market Street. And like the classic startup, like ping pong, people writing code, a bunch of young people just trying to figure it out. We'd all go out to dinner and drinks afterward. It felt like very much almost like a fraternity, But the most exciting thing to me about that whole experience was building products for people. And I kind of got hooked on software. I didn't think of myself previously as a software engineer. I was actually a physics student, but loved building stuff and realized that you could, in this place in the world, like raise money and actually take something from an idea into a real product. So when I finished my degree and I moved back out to California, I immediately started a startup, of course, building an email product. And that company was called Nihilus. And it's still around, it's still puttering along, but essentially, we started the company to build an email experience. This is like before Slack, a chat experience around email. And ultimately, like the company did okay, but didn't really take off. It wasn't this explosive success. And one of the big learnings from that was actually that it's not enough just to build the product. That's beautiful. That's nice. You actually have to build all the security stuff into it if you want to sell it to enterprise companies. You have to go figure out how to make your product enterprise ready. That's what we say at WorkOS now. So you can see the through line.
Got a little hat here,
we have our enterprise ready hats. And I've become sort of like almost like an evangelical, like obsessed, almost dogmatic about talking about this enterprise ready phrase, because I just saw not just myself, but so many other founders that hit the same wall, that built products that people loved, but they weren't able to actually go commercialize it. When they took it to market or took it up market, they kind of stalled out on their growth because enterprise customers couldn't buy it. And that's the vision for WorkOS. That's what this company is trying to do, is actually make it so any software developer, any builder, any app you're making, whether it's vibe coded or, like an existing Rails app or any company that's scaling, allow them to add the enterprise features to their app really fast so that they can go up market and go sell and turn their product into a great business, as a company.
And this company went out to have massive success, which we'll be diving into more deeply. But maybe let's start at the start, because I think I read this article about how you wrote, your first lines of code for Nihilus at MIT in the dorm, and you built this open source company, which we also at CodeRabbit care deeply about. Can you tell us a little bit about the story, how that went along,
Sure.
the first entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, funny enough, I actually wrote the first lines of code, I think, the summer before I graduated, when I was doing an internship at Nest. So I was living in Palo Alto and I was working as a designer, actually at Nest, doing product design. And so at the end of the day, I would go home and I would need to scratch the itch of building stuff. And so I'd write
Mhm.
code all night. And I had this idea for building a new mail experience. And so the
Yeah.
first thing I built was the mail synchronization system, and that connected to mailboxes through IMAP and SMTP, and kind of mirrored all the data. This is like before the Gmail API. And that was one of the first things we open sourced at Nihilus, actually, was that we called it the sync engine.
Mhm.
It's written in Python. It's a super big Python project that could connect all these different systems. And it's really the underlying runtime of the product. And the core concept of that was kind of thought about it like building a database company. Like you need to open source the runtime, but you can sell a service around it,
Mhm.
like a managed service. And that's what we did, around that side of it. Later, we actually also open sourced Nihilus Mail, Nihilus N1, which was a mail client on top of the product. And that was built on top of what was originally called Atom Shell. If you remember the Atom code editor that GitHub made, that became Electron later. And we collaborated with some folks at Slack to help turn that into a platform project. And now Electron, a lot of people know
Yeah,
Electron.
yeah, of course.
But we decided to open source that as well, actually, the actual app on top of the synchronization engine. And so you could run the whole thing end to end open source. And the reason why was we believed that this was going to become a platform other people would build on top of. It wasn't just an app. Because it was built on Electron, it had the same extension semantics.
Mhm.
So in the same way you can build, extensions to Atom at the time, now VS Code and stuff like that for different languages you might be working in, or different frameworks you're working in, or different plugins or linters, as a plugin system for it. We actually built a mail client that had the same kind of plugin system.
Wow.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So you could build extensions on top of your mail experience. If you're a recruiter, your mail experience
Mhm.
should be different than if you're a project manager, or than if you're an executive or a salesperson. It should be all about Salesforce and deals, right? Recruiter should all be about candidates. Project manager should be all about projects. It's crazy that we all use the same email client. That's
Right.
identical, right? Um, and so the idea was that would be a platform people would build on top of, and that we would really monetize other capabilities around it as we grew and
Mhm.
scaled. All that stuff worked. It was great. The plugin system is amazing. The engineering that went into that, I think, is some of the best work I've done in my career. But ultimately, we tried to go sell it to companies, right? Because think about email. It's really a
Mhm.
super tool inside of companies.
Right.
Consumers sort of use it here and there, but most people aren't emailing their friends anymore. They're like texting their friends or
Yeah,
using
yeah, yeah.
Messenger or WhatsApp or Signal or whatever. But inside of the workplace, inside of companies, people do a lot of email,
It's
right?
still like that today. It's actually
Still.
crazy that the interface hasn't really changed much.
Not at all. Actually, since back then. And so the idea was to do that. And so ultimately the end goal was to sell it to businesses. But that product we built, we obsessed around the design of it, the
Mhm.
experience of the interface, the graphics, the art, the onboarding, even the sound of it. Like I tell this story sometimes that I spent 2 days in a studio of an electronic musician in
Mhm.
Oakland who they were like an electronic artist that made sound for video games just to make the new mail sound. Because the new mail sound for an email app, you hear it all the time,
Yeah, it's
all day,
important.
every day, right? Super important. So we obsessed around the design and experience of this thing. But ultimately, when we took it to market, it had this kind of like structural security gap. And that's what I talk about as not being enterprise ready, or the enterprise chasm, that gap in between
Mhm.
building the product and actually getting it into the hands of enterprise type of customers who ultimately are the ones that pay for it and
Yeah.
create a self-sustaining business. So we weren't able to make that leap. When I realized it, it was kind of too late. We didn't have enough runway to actually go build this stuff. It was extremely complex to build.
Mhm.
I was just completely unaware of it, as a,
Yeah.
as a thing. And so WorkOS as a platform is designed to help people accelerate through that, to cross that. And funny enough, we've actually done it with a few email apps as well. So we have like,
Yeah.
a couple thousand customers, and one of them is Superhuman Email,
Wow.
which used us to go sell to enterprise and is doing great along
Yeah.
with that. So
I mean, you would have thought that I see many startups using open source as a gateway into enterprise sales. That help, or did you feel like what were the shortcomings, or what did make it easier there?
we didn't really have it as a distribution or sales
Mhm.
momentum thing. I think um, there's kind of a different model if you look at businesses like ClickHouse, where the open source core leads to it becoming like the dominant, or like the N of one in the category.
Mhm.
Like I think the idea with ClickHouse is they want to become the primary database used for time series information, right?
Right.
And if that's the entire ecosystem, some subset of that they will be able to capture as like a hosted platform and surface, and they will
Mhm.
have the best, um, kind of knowledge and principles and characteristics to be able to run it in a hosted manner, right? They'll be the best at doing that, so people would pick them.
Right.
Sort of in the same way like Next.js and Vercel have that,
Mhm.
although I think it's probably easier to run open source ClickHouse than it is easy to run Next.js without the managed infrastructure.
Mhm.
Um, but that wasn't necessarily the way for the mail client. We had very few people that would like build it themselves end to end. I think it was more about having transparency in the code base from a security perspective. It could be
Mhm.
audited, and then the hackability of it, the extensibility. If
Yeah.
you're a developer and you want to build on top of something, you want to dig into the code.
Right.
So it's probably more of like like if we had launched it with a source available license, it probably would have had the no different effect than it being
Mhm.
MIT licensed, which was. Yeah, but the underlying sync engine was always open source, and some people did run that themselves for their own products. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Interesting.
I love open source too. I'm
Yeah.
wearing my Radix shirt, which is an open source kind of headless design system,
Yeah.
a component system that we actually came to WorkOS through an acquisition we did, and we built a bunch of stuff on top of it as well.
Mhm.
So we still have open source stuff with our even with WorkOS today.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So what was the decision now then to have WorkOS be closed source?
Yeah, I mean, WorkOS is a product. If you think about like what we actually do, it sits in between like proprietary IT systems that are out
Mhm.
there in the world and developers running stuff, building stuff on top of it. We're really like an interface to those legacy, I guess maybe not kind to call them legacy, but like proprietary vendors that IT folks are using. It can't really exist like by itself. Like WorkOS just sitting there doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It's all about connecting things together. And it's kind of like Stripe in that way. Like if Stripe was open source sitting there, it wouldn't work because you would have to go connect it to all the banks, connect it to all the systems that are out there. Or Twilio is another great example. Like
Mhm.
Twilio being open source actually wouldn't help it. It would just, you know, just be code that sits there.
Yeah.
Whereas a database is different. A database you can run yourself and put stuff into it like ClickHouse or, the Postgres or something like that. So that was, I think, one big piece of it. Um, another piece of it, I think, is velocity. Like one thing I've seen with a lot of companies where they do go the route of open source, many of them kind of back out of it later if they don't get that flywheel from the distribution. So a couple of
Mhm.
examples, Graphite is one. It's acquired by Cursor
Yeah.
somewhat recently. And Graphite, people maybe don't remember, was fully open source. It was an open source company. And they pulled back from that and changed the license and started shipping features that were not open source. And a Posthog is a little bit similar in a way. Like the Posthog product launched as like open source Mixpanel or something like that, or but has gone a different dimension.
Yeah.
And it's not made Posthog worse actually. And
Super successful company. We all
and I
love
think
it.
the product's actually better, right?
Yeah.
Because they're able to do a lot of stuff on top of it if it is hosted. It's
Mhm.
it's really not about closed source, open source. It's really whether the primary product you're using is the single hosted version that the company is supporting
Mhm.
versus managing a long tier of a bunch of different versions of it. For WorkOS being open source or not open source, it's the same reason we don't do on-prem installs.
Right.
So a lot of companies that are closed source, especially in the AI era today, they will do a like a self-hosted or air gap
Mhm.
solution where they'll let you run it yourself. I was just at a conference last night with talking to some of the guys from Composio, if you know that
Mm.
company, and they've done a lot of integrations for on-prem users.
That's always a hustle.
Yeah, and once you do it, it's kind of like
Yeah.
selling your soul to the devil.
Uh-huh.
It's great initially. You get what you're trying to get right out of it, but it drags you down later because you have to continue maintaining these things. Every single company you go deploy on-prem with, if you have an update, you don't just get to push the update. They have to agree to take the update. So you have to go like convince them
Mhm.
that this update is worth it. Because they might say, well, what's in that? Maybe we'll just wait a while or we'll just do the
Yeah.
next release. Why do we need to do this? And if you're like, oh, this is a hot new feature we have, this new cool thing, they're like, oh, I don't think we need that. And now but we do need the security fixes. We do need the security patches. So now you're tasked with like managing this sprawling set, this like hyper complex wide set of actual deployments across heterogeneous environments.
Yeah.
It's this
Nightmare.
like the complexity is like fractal you get into, right? In that way. And that really slows people down. And it slows them down at the moment when you need to when you need to innovate and you have
Mhm.
kind of like the biggest demands on the platform. I'll give you another example of just like open source versus not open source, or maybe on-prem versus not on-prem, is retool.
Hmm.
So I think retool had this like amazing meteoric rise up. But if you look at the product capabilities, they're really mired in this state of having so many people using it on-prem that they can't push forward a singular version of it and change the whole experience,
Yeah.
right? They can't like completely wipe the slate clean and launch a new experience on top of it that everybody gets. And if you contrast that to something like Airtable, where they're really going after that, they're building
Hmm.
crazy new stuff. I mean, the hyper agent product that they're building is really only enabled by the fact that they have a fully managed cloud, service, like a single cloud, environment that they run in. I just had seen so many examples of this,
Yeah.
and open source is a version of doing on-prem. You might not think you're doing on-prem deployments, but you are, because you're ultimately supporting people that are going to be self-hosting in those experiences and environments. And as much as you can say support is at your own, on your own, like it's provided. What's the MIT license? Like provided as is, without any liabilities or warranties. Um, that's kind of telling your users to go, buzz off. Like it's not a
Hmm.
very good relationship with a customer using your product. They come to you and they're like, "Hey, I used your stuff and it didn't work." And so for WorkOS, I wanted to provide a product that I knew was going to work really well, that it was going to be exceptional, that I could fix issues immediately as soon as they came up, and we're going to be able to build like the best product experience for that. And I think that actually is a fully managed service, and so it's not open source.
Right.
Yeah.
So you think that that's interesting because that paradigm in your view will sustain itself then? Because I've been hearing prominent voices in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley calling that on-prem will be the next generation for corporations moving forward because not that many, yeah, there's not that much visibility into the data integrity. Basically, we are trusting, the AI model providers, which some of them are competing with us in the product that we are, building here at CodeRabbit with all our data. And there's an argument that many people made that moving everything away from the cloud to on-prem, local models, local infrastructure is the next move. But it seems like that's contrarian to what you think, where the industry is
Yeah,
going.
there's specific markets or specific types of customers that require this
Hmm.
to be the deployment mechanism, and it's typically not out of fear, it's due to regulation. And so certain things like government agencies, sometimes in areas around finance, certainly sometimes in areas around like legal tech or healthcare, they sometimes want it on their cloud. They want like a managed offering.
Hmm.
Occasionally people call this cloud prem versus on-prem. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm deploying it to an isolated instance,
Right.
and you're giving me AWS credentials to do that. So you're still paying for it,
Hmm.
right? But it's still in the cloud. It's still in sort of a managed single target environment. That is kind of the least bad option of it.
Right.
You still have to manage doing rollouts and deploys and all this stuff. It still is very complex to do, but is able to achieve like kind of infrastructure level data isolation, which those types of customers want. I honestly think this is an area where the cloud providers, the hyperscalers, are going to have to catch up, and they're going to
Mm.
because there's so much market demand.
Right.
Historically, running a multi-tenant cloud service was the right way to do it from both an economics perspective, but also from like a software development lifecycle and DevOps. It was the right way to kind of roll stuff out. And we spent, as an industry, like years and years getting good at doing this from the consumer side.
Mhm.
Dropbox, Pinterest, Facebook, Google. These are all, systems that run multi-tenant without data isolation between customer
Yeah.
segments. YouTube, right? It's like everybody can access every YouTube video, more or less, right? It's not like you can only access your company's YouTube videos. And so the way that people got good at building these like large scale systems and the underlying technologies were from the consumer Web 2.0 era of software. It's very different than I think when you see an enterprise today and the type of isolation that they want. Microsoft probably has the best, semantics for doing this in their platform,
Mhm.
but it's very Microsoft technology specific. You kind of have to build with like their frameworks and use all of their tools in the right way. It's very hard to have what people do in the kind of startup world is like
Yeah.
mix and match stuff, best of breed, and get that to work. We see ourselves in this. We see this today with a lot of customers, not an enormous amount, but a decent number, who deploy their applications single tenant for customers occasionally,
Mhm.
but they use WorkOS multi-tenant in the cloud.
Mhm.
And we have a whole way to configure our products so you get kind of the best of both worlds. You essentially point a WorkOS tenant at that specific install, and the whole thing works.
Wow.
And the reason why it's possible to do is because we're not processing customer data.
Yeah.
we're just doing this kind of like identity authentication and authorization layer. And so the end enterprise customers are actually comfortable with that. It's more of a hybrid solution.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to become kind of the next wave of like how cloud infrastructure gets pushed forward. We'll need to change a lot of the stuff we have around like telemetry collection and monitoring and alerting and
Mhm.
deployments and migrations, like all this stuff, right? You won't have one big database running. You'll have a bunch of small databases, in many different, regions necessarily running. But that transition I'm already seeing happen, and it's being pushed forward by, developers asking for this from their customers, the enterprise customers, and then also like the model hosting. So already we have things like Bedrock, right, where you can take the weights from the large multi-tenant, Claude, whatever, system, and apply those to only your infrastructure and have isolation. That's a fantastic example of like how Anthropic has like collaborated with Amazon to be able to deliver that, and you can get the same thing for Azure, the same experience with
Mhm.
OpenAI. And so I think we'll try to see more and more of that over time. Databricks has done also a fantastic job of this, where how you can kind of buy Databricks like the Microsoft Cloud and deploy it to your own infra. So there are examples of it successfully working. It's just very hard to do if you're a small company and you don't have the operational excellence to be able to put in energy into this, probably because you're trying to get product market fit.
Right.
Um, and so that I think we'll get that eventually. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 2 or 3 years somebody builds like a Heroku for like cloud prem. So it's like I can deploy, but instead of it going to the cloud mysteriously on EdgeWorker somewhere, it's going to my customer's specific region. That's their managed infrastructure, and it's this kind of like layer on top that's managing all the resources and the type of network config needed.
Mm.
If anyone's building that, please reach out to me. I'll invest in it. I think
Yeah.
someone should go build that, and ideally build it as sort of like a kind of like Terraform, like an open framework across the different hyperscalers, that can plug in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, pretty cool. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and pick on one thing that you just said, which is around product market fit. I think that's another very interesting point of discussion. After you closed the Nihilus topic, you went on a short break and you try to figure out the next big thing for you to do. And I think the approach that you took was quite interesting as well. I was reading more about it. Could you walk us a little bit through like your entrepreneurial journey to WorkOS, the time you took?
Yeah, I mean, after the first one, it's very traumatic, like starting a company and then leaving it, and trying to figure out what to do next. It's a professional crisis. It's an identity crisis. I ended up like moving to New York, for a couple of years and living there. So
Mhm.
it was like also just geographic crisis, I guess. I spent a couple months in Thailand, like doing Muay Thai and just like wandering around. So it's like I bleached my hair. I kind of describe it as like my like eat, pray, love,
Yeah.
wandering the earth. Um, and so I did that for a while, and I was just trying to figure out like what I was interested in and what to do next. Like having started
Mhm.
that company like right out of school, like the idea I had when I was in college, I had only thought about building that for a long time. And so I spent a while just kind of reading books and trying to come up with new ideas and just following my nose. This is back in 2017, 2018. And so I got very interested in like aviation and online ethics and like transportation. I was thinking about building a thing with cars. Um, I just had all these different ideas, and I tried to, as much as I could, just keep an open mind and keep writing them down and collating them. But when I started thinking about what to build next for like a company, not just a project, but like actually a thing I would want to commercialize. Um, Given how hard I knew it was going to be, I was no longer, ignorant of the challenges of it. I wanted to make sure that whatever I worked on had the possibility of being successful, like really successful in the market. Um, and so I knew I needed to pick like a big TAM.
Mhm.
One of the hard things about Nihilus, even today, is like the TAM for like email data, email
Mhm.
syncing.
What is TAM?
Total addressable market. Yeah. So it's a business term. It essentially means like the biggest possible size your business could ever make. So if you win 100% of your market, how big is that market? And if that market isn't that big, you're kind of screwed. Sometimes you can sell into an area where the market is expanding. So like Uber is a great example of this, where like they competed with taxis, but obviously Uber today is way bigger than the taxi industry, and that's because
Mhm.
transportation is much larger than the taxi industry. Um, but for a lot of other areas, you're TAM constrained if you pick a small market. So I wanted to pick a big market, not just a big market, an enormous market, the biggest market I could think of, and IT stuff. was that. And I say IT stuff because it's like so many different things. Like if you look at what is IT spend in the world, if you put that into Claude or something, it'll give you back some crazy big number. It's like
Mhm.
trillions of dollars,
Wow.
truly unfathomable size. And so I was like, okay, that's a big TAM. It's a big market. So I know if I'm playing inside of that, I can adjust and pivot and maybe find a different business if the first one doesn't work
Mhm.
out. Um, I also wanted to find an industry to work in that hadn't really had a transformational moment, like a Stripe moment. I was very inspired by the Collisons and how they had built and still have built Stripe as a company. I still admire them. And so when I looked at like fintech, I was like, fintech was kind of unloved before Stripe. Um, and Dropbox even before that, everyone disregarded it as a category. Like, oh, why would you build in that?
Mhm.
And so I started thinking, I was like, what are areas that kind of are boring, that aren't attracting people? At the time, crypto was ripping, super hot. So I was like, I'm not going
Mhm.
to do that. Everybody's in that, or VR, or these other things. But again, this IT thing, I was like, IT is like, you know,
Completely overlooked.
yeah, and it sounds gross. Like, why? Who wants to build a
Yeah.
company in IT? It wasn't attracting the best founders or entrepreneurs or even anyone.
Yeah.
So I saw that too, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then the third thing around finding a startup idea, it's very hard, I think, to find good ideas if you don't have personal experience in the domain. Because if you're just trying to sit around, come up, just spending brain cycles, to come up with something or reading something, you don't have any advantage over like business school students sitting around or VCs or other just smart people, right? You all get the same information. And so it's very challenging to come up with a alpha, in the investing term,
Mhm.
an edge, unique information. And so I think the best place to come from startup ideas is where you have unique information.
Right.
And the only place you can find that is your own personal experiences. And so I was like, what was something about my previous experience that it had at Nihilus that I could like take forward? Were there any lessons I learned or something I felt like I discovered that was not obvious? And there's a lot of stuff like that. I mean, how we
Mhm.
did sales, different products I thought weren't good, the architecture of how we had built Nihilus Mail I thought was really interesting. I thought about building a company around Electron. I was like, this is going to be a big thing. It's this hybrid of web and so I had a bunch of experience, but I tried to put all these things together and find the intersection between things that, felt like it could be an enormous market. It felt like I had some, unique experience around it, and that market had been sort of unloved. Um, and what I found at the intersection of that was all this stuff to be enterprise ready, all this enterprise stuff that
Mm.
was a blind spot for me. Nobody wanted to build it. It seemed like someone should build Stripe for this stuff, this enterprise stuff. And I think the last piece, the fourth one kind of on top, was it was for developers. So this type of company, unlike Nihilus as an email product, which is for just anybody using email in the
Yeah.
workplace, WorkOS, I was like, it's going to be an API company for developers. And anybody that's built stuff for developers, it's the best. It's the
Mhm.
best. If you're an engineer building stuff for developers, it's the dream,
Yeah.
right? It's
Mhm.
building your own stuff. You get to sell to people like you. And at least for me, it's extremely satisfying to see other companies build on top of what I've built, like be a part of their success. And so that hit the bullseye around all those things. Selling to developers now is challenging and building businesses, but from sort of a product analysis, that was like more or less the kind of thesis I had. And I knew that these enterprise features would be valuable because ultimately they hold back revenue.
Right.
Ultimately, like if you don't have them, they result in business constraint. And so I knew that if I could deliver them in some way to companies, that I would be able to commercialize it because I'd be providing a lot of value to it. Not knowing the pricing or structure or anything, I was just like,
Mhm.
people will pay for this.
Right.
They'll pay for this. Um, so that was the concept for the company, and that's why at WorkOS I don't think about WorkOS as like an identity company, or people call us like an auth company or
Mhm.
stuff like that. To me, like those are all didn't start the company saying I'm going to go after the identity and access management, blah 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 industry. To me, it's actually about helping companies grow and scale and kind of unblocking these technical components that they need to grow. And
Yeah.
it turns out auth is a big piece of that. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, it is indeed. I mean, the company has been growing like crazy. From my perspective, reading a lot about what WorkOS does, it seemed like you built it with a very clear mission in mind, which was to cross the enterprise chasm, the term that you, yeah, coined. Can you explain us a little bit to what you mean by that and why it's such a fundamental part of what guides WorkOS today?
Yeah, it's funny sometimes the things that stick. So WorkOS is not a new startup. It's like over 7 years old at this point. And in the first 6 months of building the company, maybe less even, I gave this talk
Mhm.
at an event that was at the GitHub office, and the talk was called "Crossing the Enterprise Chasm." And there's this book called "Crossing the Chasm" by Jeffrey Moore, and it's kind of like a standard business school book you read, and it's really about how products, any product, not a developer product, goes from like early adopters, people just getting started using it, to mass market, and
Mhm.
what happens when products don't make that jump, you know. And it's kind of an analysis of those transitions. And so I'd been thinking a lot about companies that struggled to go up market through SaaS, and kind of had this parallel to what I call the enterprise chasm, which is really the lack of focus on these capabilities needed for enterprise IT. And it's also like pricing and go to market needed for enterprise. But a lot of it is these like security features essentially. And companies either don't do them and they kind of fail, or they do
Mhm.
them and they have a chance of winning their market and succeeding. And so I literally made the slides for this talk like the night before. It was just stuff bouncing around inside my head for
Mhm.
months, and got all this momentum from it. And it kind of became like the narrative thesis of WorkOS as a company. And I've given an update to the talk since then. It has a bunch of new things that we had built. But it really is the mission of this company, is like to help developers cross that chasm, really to like add all the capabilities they need to build something faster and go to market sooner, and scale, to a larger degree.
I think it's very interesting that you say help developers cross the chasm because I also read in another article that you have a very interesting hiring paradigm at WorkOS, which is more, I want to call it hiring product engineers. I don't know if that's fair, but my idea of a product engineer is somebody who owns the full stack from talking to the customer, like a product manager, to writing the requirements, to building the feature itself and delivering it to sales and so on. Is that paradigm, is that description accurate?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. This product engineering function, and we've written a little bit about it online. And essentially, developers and engineers do that. They are the PM. They're
Mhm.
talking to users. They're taking things end to end. Um, we have almost 60 people in our engineering organization and only one PM across all of it. I do some PM stuff, kind of, but really, it's the engineering organization owning that. I think we get away with it, and it works really well for us because our product is for developers.
Mhm.
If we were building a product not for engineers, it would be very challenging for an engineer to be the product manager for it, to kind of
Yeah.
really own. Like if we are building a product for lawyers, very hard for an engineer to like very quickly understand what lawyers want. But if you're building it for other engineers and they've written a lot of software, they kind of know here's right. The person that should design the API structure should be an engineer.
Right.
Right. So even our designers are like quite technical and like build stuff and think about code and application architecture
Mhm.
and data modeling and systems. So I think it's somewhat unique to us, but also we have found that by hiring people with this kind of spiky multidimensionality and
Mm.
giving them like a lot of ownership, it's like a very high autonomy and agency environment. They're able to go ship things end to end. And there's often teams of, 2, 3, 4 people, sometimes just teams of one person that goes and builds things end to end. And they even write the launch blog post, they'll demo it, they'll get it in the hands of customers. They're doing the whole experience. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds amazing in many points. Some people might argue it sounds like a lot too. How do you manage to get the workload for these people right so they don't burn out under the pressure because you're also serving some very big clients and it's complicated.
Yeah, so I should say, like, not everyone in the company is doing exactly this. Like, we
Mhm.
have a foundations engineering team that's working on our infrastructure. We have a security team. We have people that specialize in different product areas. Some projects will last a few days. Some projects will last months. And so it's quite varied across all of that. However, I think when it comes to like burnout,
Mhm.
what I have found is people usually burn out from doing work they don't like, and they also burn out from collaborating in ways that's frustrating to them.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily like if an engineer just has a ton of work to do, but they're like excited by it,
Mhm.
they'll figure out time to sleep, and eat and take care of their
Mhm.
family and stuff. But they'll be excited about going to work. They'll look forward to it. They'll at the end of the day, if they're tired or exhausted, it'll feel good. It feels like you're like after going for a long hike or something like that in the sun, you're like, oh, okay, I felt that was a fun, day, at least for me. Um, What's really frustrating, I think, especially for engineers, is when they feel like they're slowed down. When they feel like they have to go through a bureaucratic process where they have to follow all these rules, they have to do checkpoints in this way. Their judgment is not seen as being like clear enough to be able to like make decisions.
Mhm.
And when people get stuck in that scenario, they're not shipping, they're not actually building stuff, and that's really frustrating. And I think from that, people will eventually burn out. It's not just the volume of work. You can burn out doing very little amounts of work if you feel like it doesn't matter and you don't have agency in it. And so what we really try to do as an organization is provide like clarity of direction, like what's important, why, prioritization, and then the resources for people to actually go build stuff and do it. And then we trust that the engineers we hire and the people are adults, that they can take care of themselves. And if they're grinding and there's tons of work, that they'll bring it up and be like, hey, we're not going to be able to ship. Like just literally today, I was talking with an engineer about a project that we've been really excited about. I talked with them about it on Friday about the shipping timeline for it. And I was like, do you think we could get the first version out by this date? It'd be really good to get that, in the hands of people. And this engineer was like, yeah, totally. And then this morning was like, actually, I thought about it. I don't think we're gonna be able to make it. I started listing everything out. There's like no way I can get it done
Done.
at our level
Yeah.
by then. And it's like, okay, cool. We'll just like figure it out. We'll
Mhm.
restructure it. But it's the high agency of that person to determine the timeline when to ship it. It's not some random manager who's saying it has to be done by this date. Sometimes we have conversations around, okay, if we cut scope or changed it, what could we
Mhm.
do? That's kind of a conversation. But people usually burn out, I think, if they don't think what they're working on matters and they don't have ownership and agency and autonomy over it. And so we try to make sure that those things are very well satisfied at the company. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and you're obviously doing amazing at it. Some of the famous clients that use your product are companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, just to like the cursor, just to mention a few. And what is it like to keep a ship running for those type of AI companies that have clients, customers all over the world? How do you ensure the uptime and all the
I
things?
think it's enormous responsibility. For us, like uptime reliability, we talk a lot about focusing on shipping and like externally, that's what we talk about. And if you look at our change log, we're doing a launch week right now, there's pretty relentless around shipping stuff, but none of that matters if the service isn't up or fast and dependable. Um, and ultimately I think that's what you live or die by from an infrastructure company. Like
Yeah.
ideal infrastructure is something that's like a clean API abstraction that hides a bunch of mess that you never think about ever. It's like the water in your house or something, at least in America. You turn on the water and you like never think, is this clean or not? Where did it come from? Is this fresh? You just like that service from the government or SF Water and Power or whatever is so dependable that it just removes that anxiety or thought from your mind. And that doesn't exist in a lot of other places in the world, that don't have that same kind of dependability. That to me is great infrastructure. You drive across the bridge, you don't think if it's going to fall over.
Hmm.
You know, you take the ferry, you don't think if it's going to sink in the middle of the bay, right? And so the number one, like the P0, essentially is always like robust uptime and reliability. We don't get it right all the time, just because we're scaling too, but we do a lot of the time, and especially over the last couple of years, like the investments we've made in infrastructure with these companies that have scaled, um, we've spent a lot of time with it. We tend not to talk about it as much because we
Hmm.
like to talk about new product features we're shipping, but we spend an enormous amount of time on it internally as a team and across our engineering organization to figure out how can we ship fast, but also deliver this level of service that's humming along at a very, very fast pace for all these major companies and sort of disappears in the background for them.
On that point, actually, I think you also have a product called Pipes. I found that
We do.
analogy, yeah,
We do.
very, very funny and suiting and fitting. Um, Before all of that success with all these major names that we just talked about, how did you hire for these type of roles? Because engineers normally like to build fancy features, and we love to build something that is visible in the product, in the UI, or in the service, in the outcome. I just logged into my ChatGPT this morning, and I thought about you, but I don't think many other people did as they logged into theirs today.
I think you need kind of a different type of person to work on stuff like
Hmm.
this. The person who wants to build features that are really shiny, that demo super hot, that everyone sees, you know, those people tend not to be attracted to work on infrastructure type of solutions. They're sort of the one that's like in a theater. They're the one on stage, with the spotlight on them, doing the dance or whatever. We like to hire people and work with people who are more like the sound person or the person running the lights or the person backstage calling the show, the kind of supporting infrastructure that actually makes the performance happen. And it's not people that are less talented in any way, but it's people that find it satisfying, maybe more satisfying, to be the supporting role across everything. And I think it's just kind of like a different way of thinking about your work. I think it's um, I have found it's kind of funny thinking about like my career and other things I built and as a child. I've always found it more interesting to build tools for other people. It's just kind of I've built products too and worked on things for folks, but even with Dropbox is kind of this thing that like the tagline used to be, it just works. You just don't think about it. You put it in the folder and you're like, oh, it's done.
Yeah.
And there's sort of this ultimate elegance and simplicity about things that disappear. One of my favorite design books is called Supernormal. It's by Jasper Morrison, who's an industrial designer, and he was a lead designer at Muji and a bunch of other companies over time. But in this book, he talks about the design of objects that are so natural, they're so normal, they're super normal that they disappear. They're like the types of things like door handles, you just don't think about, you just interface with them, or cups, you just know how to pick it up. And they kind of just become like part of the world, you know? And I think great infrastructure products, that the desire to create something like that requires that you like remove the need for ego satisfaction out of it. You need to remove the need for attention,
Hmm.
and this, honestly, I think this is like a personality thing. I think you have
Yeah.
to,
So how do you hire for that? How do you test? Is there like a set of questions you ask or a stereotype? How do you read a CV and like, oh, this guy likes to build tools for other people?
it's very challenging. I think you can look to people's previous work,
Uh-huh.
how they interfaced. I think you can do references on folks, talk to people who've worked with them. That always is the most illuminating.
Okay.
Doing a spot interview is very hard. It's very, very hard.
Hmm.
It's like going on a date with somebody and
Yeah.
like in an hour over coffee, trying to like learn, all you learn is like how they drink coffee, and how they talk you don't know anything about like, it's why people always say like, if you go travel with somebody,
Yeah.
you'll really learn them, right? Because in travel, you're in all these different crazy situations together, and you have to negotiate and coordinate and stuff. One fast way to do it, you can do work trials, which a lot of companies do, but you can
Hmm.
also get this through references, through talking to folks I've worked with. So I think that's part of it as well. And then I think last, like just trying to figure out like what they're looking for. Like one of the things I always ask people in an interview is like, what are you looking for next? What's been missing in your career? What are you looking for next in it? One of the things we're looking for in terms of that is self-awareness, that they kind of know what's been a good fit for them, what hasn't been a good fit for them. It's kind of like know thyself, a bit. And I think for people that we have some general selection in that, like, people don't come to WorkOS to get paid the most. They don't come to work on the shiniest product. We have more success today, but I think earlier on it was actually somewhat, I wouldn't say it was easier to hire, but it was more filtered because the only people that would take a call with us were people that would want to work on infrastructure. And so it's a little bit more self-selecting at that era. Yeah.
I see. I
Now we
see.
just raise a big Series B and people are like, oh, I need a job, and we're like, why do you want to work on infrastructure? They're like, oh, I don't know. Like, that's not very compelling. But we look for people that are drawn to this type
Yeah.
of like supportive work.
I can imagine you still get a great deal of good applications, at least the folks that I've met who
Oh, it's
work at
crazy. With
OKS.
AI, we published our applied AI role. We have this new amazing team called Applied AI, which is
Yeah.
like, it's like the dream job. It's like people are, it's a very fast shipping iteration cycle, being plopped into different teams and going building crazy stuff. Awesome. And it's like a product engineering role, like on steroids. And we have a couple open recs for it. So we put up a job listing for it. And I think in the first hour, we got like 500 applications. And it's funny because I think it's AI applying. So in some ways, those people are qualified if they're using
Yeah.
AI to
Yeah.
apply for stuff. But yeah, we try to keep our team pretty small and we're looking for pretty specialized talent. Yeah.
How big is the company now?
A little over 100 or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And engineering's a bit over half of that.
Let's pivot back a little bit into the more of the product side of things. One thing that I was very interested, kind of leaning over that entrepreneur journey that we talked about earlier, was the part where you talked a little bit about this minimal awesome product. a term that you used at the start to kind of describe, what companies have to build in order to explore an idea, but then also be ready for the next step. Can you explain them also what do you mean?
Yeah, it's one of our operating principles is we want to ship things that honestly just feel impressive, things that are notable or remarkable, like remarkable in the literal sense, like worthy of remark, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's just a lot of, I mean, now we call it slop in the
Yeah.
world, but for a long time in the startup world, there's been a lot of doing the bare minimum and this experimentation of just the bare minimum. And it's not very respectful to the user. If you really hold the user in high regard, you're not going to ship the minimum possible thing for them. Like imagine
Mm-hmm.
going to a restaurant and them having the minimum cleanliness that's acceptable or the minimum flavor in the food that's good. You would never want to go back to that place. You would never talk about it again. You would just forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
Best case, it would just dissolve from your brain. To me, having that be the goal of how you do product development is such an uninspiring way to go through life. And I understand where it comes from. And I think there's actually wisdom behind fast iteration. And, it's kind of pioneered by Eric Ries and then a lot of stuff with Y Combinator and Paul Graham, ship early, ship often. All that stuff is designed to get you out of your head and into the market.
Right.
Start testing stuff, learning. But it turns out you can get a lot of information. You just go talk to people, talk to users. It's another one of our operating principles is talk to users.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we aim to do is talk to a lot of people, get a lot of information from people. But when we deliver something to them, we want it to be great. We actually want it to be something that's going to like significantly improve their life and not in a way that's like just this tiny, small change, but is actually like significant enough that they feel compelled to share it, that they've like stumbled upon something great, something fantastic that they just feel like they need to tell the world about. And that's where we draw our bar, for us. And so we'll not ship stuff if we just think it's fine. We'll be like, okay, this isn't awesome. Let's like
Mm-hmm.
push on it a little bit more. And typically it doesn't take that much longer, but if you have that be your criteria for success, I have found that people are excited to
Yeah.
go after that, the right type of people. Might be frustrating in the moment, if you've been working on something for months and it's like, okay, it's not there yet. You're like, oh God, I just want to ship it. Um, but the end result is that you build things that you're truly proud of. And I think that's a very meaningful and honorable way to do your work.
I agree, but it breaks with a lot of the paradigms that you just mentioned yourself. Many of the ideas that companies like Y Combinator put out there on how you build startups. So would you say there's like a balance, a threshold from when you have to pivot into building the minimal awesome product from the minimal viable product, or should you always aim for that? And how then do you balance speed with early feedback? And
Yeah, I think so I love Y Combinator, to be clear. I'm like a
yeah.
really big fan of it. I think it's one of the coolest things that's been built in Silicon Valley. I'm an enormous fan of what Gary has done with it also
Mhm.
since taking the reins and growing it. I think the advice that they give for Y Combinator for the type of founders that are in that program and the stage of companies that are in it is completely appropriate. I think it's like totally what you should do if you're in
Mhm.
YC is that fast, early, fast, often. Because they're running like hundreds of these tiny experiments,
Yeah.
and if it doesn't work, the company disappears. It
Mhm.
evaporates. So there's not a lot of like density or meaning in it. If what you're trying to build though is like longer term brand and you have a reputation and developers are going to consistently depend on you, then everything you ship has to be in alignment with that and integrity with it. So you mentioned the pipes product that we shipped. We knew the first version of that had to be great. It doesn't have to have that many features. It can be
Mhm.
like minimally, minimal capabilities, but those things have to be really great, really, really great that are in it. And so I think it's just different. It's misapplying what people do at the Y Combinator era to like a maybe Series A or Series B era company. It's the same type of misapplication, I think, that occurs when people do like board of directors meetings, like a public company, and they apply that to a Series A, Series B company. That's also ludicrous. The governance of a large scale public company, doing hundreds of millions or billions in revenue, the
Mhm.
governance structure of that applied to a early stage Series A company is like nonsensical.
Yeah.
But people still do this. They're like, oh, I had my board meeting, and my investors are on the board and we had slides and all that. It's like every 3 months. The world changes so fast in 3 months. If you're making strategic decisions every 3 months, you're toast, you know? And so I think it's just really stage appropriate, and there is some transition point probably after you start to get initial momentum or depending on your customer base, where you transition from, essentially using your users as test subjects. You're experimenting on the live subject to like, okay, maybe we should take care of them a little bit more and
Hmm.
not have them experience you know, a tough quality product.
I think one of the differences that I would say is between these pre-seed, Y Combinator, early startups to what you're describing is that the feeling of product market fit, so to say. And I think that's a term that I've heard you mentioning previously as well. How do you define it, and how do you know that you have it?
I think that's like maybe PG said that PMF product market fit is like you know it when you have it. It's kind of like well, that's like not very helpful. It's like make something people want. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
thanks. I was gonna do the
yeah.
other thing. It's like I have experienced it though, like what it feels like to have it and not have it.
Hmm.
The best way I can describe it is when you have product market fit, it's kind of like the Mario star, where you're like a little bit untouchable.
Hmm.
Product market fit lets you continue to make mistakes or kind of like seemingly bad decisions, and yet the core mechanic of the business continues to succeed. And this is sometimes articulated by people by by them saying they'll use your product despite it missing features or despite it being slow or being clunky or all this stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's that there's some defects with the thing, and yet you continue to grow and succeed. And I think you can even survive like pretty enormous mistakes in a company. I mean, if you look at a lot of these businesses that have been this huge breakout successes, and you look at the early days, it's like they hit all the road bumps.
Yeah.
you know, they had co-founders that like blew up and left. They picked the wrong database. I mean, my favorite is Stripe. Their primary database was MongoDB,
Uh-huh.
which like Mongo's solid now, but at the time was like not good. It like had consistency issues. You pick the database that has
Yeah.
data consistency issues for a financial services product.
Oof.
Like, ugh,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and yet that didn't sync them. They were not just
Uh-huh.
fine, they thrived, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing about product market fit is like if you can get that right, nothing else matters
Hmm.
because it gives you the opportunity to correct everything else. Even if you have the wrong team. This is like the craziest thing too. Usually investors at the early stages, they're investing in,
The
the
people.
people,
Yeah.
right? Which you should do if there's no idea yet, or you're going to pivot a bunch because the people
Hmm.
are going to stay consistent. But once the company has product market fit, what ends up happening is it attracts better and better talent to it, right? The team gets stronger and stronger. And so it truly is the only thing that matters. And I mean, I've done a bunch of little angel investing, and what I have seen is product market fit is extremely rare,
Hmm.
extremely rare. You can't predict if it's going to happen or not. And so when you do seed investing and as a startup, you're just trying to increase your likelihood of achieving it by increasing your surface area. And the way you do this is by running a really large number of experiments to try a
Hmm.
bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's like pivoting, and that's the lean startup, and that's the thing around, if I can ship 20 MVPs instead of
Hmm.
10, I've doubled my chances of finding some success. And so at that stage, pre-PMF, it is absolutely the right thing to do. With WorkOS, though, is a bit of a different company in the sense that I had seen this like very specific thing that I wanted to go solve, and it was sort of a bullseye, because I experienced it before. That's very unusual.
Did you ever wanted to pivot during any
No,
part of the journey? No.
no, not at all. It's crazy. You can go back, and this again, this is extremely unusual. I think
Yeah.
I think a large aspect of it is I got lucky, too. But if you go back and look at even like the seed deck that I'd used, it's nearly identical to what you could use today around the company. So the thesis was like spot on. The way we built it was spot on, and I think it's just, you know, I had such a definitive experience that
Yeah.
led to the company idea in my mind, and then I was just kind of obsessed with solving it. To be honest, like that previous company experience was so traumatic that for this one, I was like, I need to make it so no one else experiences this. I need to like eradicate this problem.
Wow.
And so in some ways, I probably worked on it for longer than a normal sane person would, but I just wanted to keep, solving it, getting it. And thankfully it's turned out to be a great outcome so far. Um,
Was there a moment when you felt like, okay, now I've got it? Do you remember?
There's been several moments like that,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah. One of them in particular was actually when we launched. So actually tomorrow is our launch anniversary.
Wow.
Of 6 years ago, we launched. Yeah. It was March of, 2020 during the pandemic when everything was shut down and crazy. It was crazy times, right?
Mm.
And so I was like, "We need to launch the company and get it out." No press releases, no events, no reporters wanna talk. Of course, they don't wanna talk to a startup launch. Um, and so we launched it through Product Hunt and Hacker News and Twitter.
Wow.
And we were on the top page of HN all day and, tons of people tweeting about it. And I just really distinctly remember all of these people really liking the idea, all these developers. And I feel like if you can get people in Hacker News to like what you're doing,
That goes a long way.
and not be snarky, not be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I could build this in a weekend," or "This is dumb." People are like, "Oh, you're building like Stripe for enterprise stuff. Oh, I hate building that stuff. I would love to just use this."
Yeah.
And so that was a moment. We had $0 in revenue. We had 0 customers, but I felt like I had this resonance around kind of the thesis of the company, the story I had told, and how we had positioned it. And then it was our job to actually like turn that into a real product in the company. And that was enormously challenging. I mean, I thought we were going to be able to grow it much faster in terms of product features and revenue, and it just turned out to be a big slog. It's just stuff is really hard. It turns out. um, but ultimately, like I think it has resulted in that outcome, and we've had other moments along the way, like our first few paying customers. When we launched multiple products and those started getting adoption, we started seeing the kind of dynamics of having a multi-product platform and the
Mhm.
cross-pollination across different product features and how they kind of snap fit together. That gave us more confidence to build more stuff as we scaled up the team more, really figuring out how to do product engineering without PMs. Like there were these things that were kind of moments of the company's trajectory that I think just gave us more and more confidence. And then in the last couple of years, it's been the momentum around AI. The number of AI companies, we're like a perfect fit for AI businesses.
Why is that?
I think it's because they're all B2B software companies, actually,
Mhm.
um, under the hood. That's how they sell product. They sell product to businesses. They help automate business process. They bring utility to augmenting or replacing labor. And so they get deeply embedded inside of their customers' business functions. And rightfully so, the IT people within those organizations are concerned about things like security and authentication and permissions and all of that. And that's what we provide. And so we're really, really good fit for them. Plus, they grow super fast. And so they have no time to build this themselves, certainly not to build it at like a high degree of fidelity. And right place, right time, right amount of maturity. And we can scale with them too,
Yeah.
And so it's been sort of like a tailwind. Like it's funny if you look at our growth as a company, like our revenue growth, it's always been a good business. We were always growing and doing well. It's just the AI
Mhm.
stuff just like put on
So
top of it. I mean, sure, CodeRabbit's the same thing, right? It's like the amount of like AI, the code reviews coming from AI is accelerating something that was already a thing that people were doing. It's just,
yeah, I think CodeRabbit has the founders have had a very good vision, very similar to yours, projecting where the market was gonna be and having the product ready when the market was gonna hit that point. And this year is really the year for us where we do see a lot of people not only in Silicon Valley but also externally seeing the pain of
yeah.
AI generated code. Speaking about which, actually, what is your defensive mode against these models getting better and better, and people probably your sales engineers now have a lot of these discussions buy or make, especially with Claude and all these other coding tools becoming exceptional. How do you see your company sustaining the position it has right now?
Yeah. It's pretty easy to vibe code like kind of simple auth in your
Hmm.
app. Like if you're like, I just need to add Google sign in. The APIs are very simple for Google sign in. It's OAuth. And you can just add that and vibe code it and it's just straightforward. If you want to add the type of enterprise authentication that we provide across tens of thousands of enterprise customers, you can't vibe code that because there's not any training data for it. It's these proprietary locked up IT systems to integrate with. And so we have found that actually it's quite defensible against people. I mean, we sell it to the model providers, the model
Yeah.
labs, right? They're some of our biggest customers, right? So even the people that have the best, whatever,
Coding models.
Codex 6 or whatever, internally, they're still using WorkOS. So I haven't yet seen people say we're going to vibe code out our security layer of what WorkOS provides. Maybe it'll happen someday,
Yeah.
but I haven't seen it yet. What we're doing with our platform, though, first of all, I think what's happening with software engineering is like the most exciting thing that will probably happen in my whole career. It's like
Mhm.
it's it is breathtaking the fact that we've made it so easy to build stuff, and it kind of came out of nowhere. You know, like the AI chat stuff was like cool a couple years ago. And it's like, okay, cool, we'll be able to do this for customer support. I was not expecting it to be this transformative for software engineering, for the thing that I, practice and do. And there's a lot of doomerism around, our engineers cooked, or like we're gonna be,
Mhm.
completely toast as a profession or whatever. I think it's the complete opposite. It's like this is the best era for building that's ever existed in the history of the world. Um, we have turned this thing that like was complex to do, that you had to go to school for, you had to have specialized knowledge for, and we've made it possible to just, create it through the most natural form possible, which is language.
Right.
That's like that's a crazy transformation. It's like the invention of like the bicycle or something, or the
Mhm.
wheel. Like it's truly, truly different. And so everything we're doing at WorkOS is like to help that happen in the world faster. We're selling this product to the model labs and to a lot of other companies getting built. But at the end of the day, WorkOS, again, this whole crossing the enterprise chasm thing, it's entirely designed just to help you build your thing faster. That's it. That's it. And that could be go up market faster. That could be
Mhm.
satisfy enterprise stuff faster. But ultimately, it's just build stuff faster. That's it. And we want more people to be able to build stuff and people to be able to accelerate in that way. And so I think what you'll find over the next several years is like the products we provide won't just be like some authentication stuff. Of course, we'll do
Mhm.
that. Of course, that's a big piece of it. Every app needs to know who you are,
Yeah.
but it also might need to know what agent is accessing it or doing something with it. It might need to connect to different systems. It might need to have generative UI inside of it. There's so many different things that, actually applications will need in the future. And we really want WorkOS just to be a set of kind of like Lego blocks, Lego bricks that you can snap
Mhm.
together to build new things extremely fast. And to like just be part of this acceleration that's happening in the software engineering world. And it probably means some stuff that's in the like, some stuff in the past doesn't exist anymore really as a job. Like front end engineering is like it's changed so dramatically. It's probably irrecognizable.
Yeah.
Um,
Where do you see us go, us developers, you and me, or all the people in this office here?
I like this term builder. I've heard it a lot. The idea of being the person to make the thing, to
Mhm.
build it, to think about. I think this thing we have internally at WorkOS around product engineering feels extremely relevant right now with the fact that developers are very leveraged, in terms of what they're able to output. Um, I think the era of just taking tickets off the Jira board and writing code, and people that are sort of like a mid-level engineer where someone else scopes something out for you, and you're kind of this like, code monkey.
Mhm.
Like that's been automated. Now we have the mechanical code monkeys. We have the code factories building this stuff. And so I think it'll be much more important for the right ideas to come through. Um, and they'll probably be, I mean, that's a hard skill. Probably what'll happen is the percentage of people that can do that will be lower. Today, like the percentage of people that can be really clear product thinkers and build stuff is like smaller percentage than everyone. But what's going to happen is we're democratizing access to this stuff.
Mhm.
And so the number of people total in the world that can ever do this is going to increase by orders of magnitude. Like if, like for example, you just think about this, like there's, say like 10%, of people are really good product thinkers and engineers. Maybe it's higher than that, lower. I don't know. Say 10%. There's roughly 30 million software developers in the world, right? Um, and with the coding models, a lot of people have said we've like 10x'd the number of, or 20x, say
Mhm.
20x'd the number of developers in the world, right? So we've gone from, 300 million, sorry, 30 million developers to 600 million people that can write code. And they're like vibe coding and
Mhm.
building stuff in Replit and Bolt and, Lovable and whatever, and Claude Code. And us, formal developers are like, that's not real engineering, but they're building stuff, right? They're building stuff and shipping stuff. So say
Yeah.
there's 600 million of
Yeah.
those people. We added, 570 million on top, 570 million. If still it's 10% of them have good taste, now we've gone from 3 million, you know, of those developers to 60 million of them. We've actually doubled the number of developers in the world that have good taste and are good engineers from 30 to 60. And I think that's like totally possible to happen, to have 600 million people in the world that are software engineers or able to create software, like something that's a little less than 10% of the global population. That's not unreasonable if you think about the number of people that have iPhones.
I think it might be even more, to be honest. I see people now using especially those applications with the non-technical person as their
That's right.
ICP, their ideal customer profile. Yeah, it's just blooming. I mean, my girlfriend built an app, last weekend, and
Right.
it's working. I got it on my phone.
And they might not call themselves software engineers, but they won't associate with that. It won't
Yeah.
be their identity, but they're just making stuff. It's this idea of kind of software literacy or creative literacy. And I think that's going to be, I think too many people are concerned with this idea that we're like squeezing, it's like zero sum. We're like squeezing something where
Hmm.
there's not enough demand for it. And I think the world has endless demand for software. This is like, I mean, I'm an optimist, but I think it's this never ending, the Jevons paradox type of thing. We will have that level of consumption and need. And so when a lot of people in the tech world are like, is Lovable going to compete with, Bolt Stack Blitz or Bolt or what, Replik? Like, are they going to be head to head? I think everything is actually going to flourish. At some point, there might be competitive dynamics between
Hmm.
them, but I think there's more so going to be this Cambrian explosion of flourishment and creativity because this democratization, the tooling that you can get, it's breathtakingly powerful, across the board. And so I think the role of like software engineers, as we think about it today, there will be a subset of them that are product engineers that can become not just a 10x engineer, but a 100x engineer on top of it, right? Because they understand the full stack in the system and they'll be like super product engineers. There's also going to be a whole set of engineers building infrastructure and infrastructure for these other platforms that enable other people to build stuff and grow faster. And I think that's, it's probably a very good time to invest in infrastructure companies. I mean, if you go talk to the guys like Anurag building Render or Jake at Railway about their growth, they're seeing this too. I think it's the reason GitHub keeps going down. It's because there's an influx of so much more code and projects getting pushed in.
That's actually a very interesting point. Yeah. No, I mean, I love Railway, great product. I think they really took off, and I've been seeing a lot of non-technical people using their product as well because it's so easy now.
So easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you need it for is not the complexity of what's with AWS that was kind of built for a previous system. You need something else for this era. So I think there's just going to be a flourishing of this stuff. And, there's places where the level of investment maybe isn't sustainable, long term.
Hmm.
But I think there's a lot of other places where it is going to be. And generally, it seems like a lot of people are spending more time focused on the negative, like here's all the reasons why this isn't going to happen, rather than walking through what the world looks like if it does happen.
Hmm.
And it seems like, certainly to me, and I think many others, that the upside case is becoming more and more possible and more likely around the democratization of tools in these things. And it's it's like the enlightenment, for this. So we will need infrastructure to support that. Um, at this conference I was at yesterday, there's a whole panel about people from the model layer and observability and the application layer and all this. We don't have the tools yet for it. We all need to catch up in that way. And my goal is for WorkOS to be one piece of that.
Hmm.
We're kind of doing that around these pieces of security and authentication and permissions and stuff that's really, really, really important. But there's many other people that are going to be solving it too. And I think as kind of a technology industry, if we want this to truly get into the hands of everyone really fast, we need people building all the supporting components, not just people training the models, but people building the things that it can connect to and how it can be used across the world.
Yeah. Walk me through what is the vision for WorkOS there, a bit more detail. So, you built some amazing infrastructure that is already used by great players in the game. What's going to be the next level, especially as we see more agents using your authentication layer? And what are your thoughts around that, and what can we expect?
So my first kind of product roadmap, I used to joke, if you just went to the pricing page of a
Yeah.
mature SaaS product, you have like free and like pro, and then you have enterprise, there's bullet points of stuff
Yeah.
in it. I was like, I just build that stuff. That was it. So it's like SSO,
Yeah.
SCIM, provisioning, audit
Should have
logs,
had all
role-based
those.
access
Yeah.
control, yada, yada, compliance, all this stuff, encryption, EKM, all this stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's really where we started. That's probably our product roadmap for the first 5 years or something. Um, Nowadays, I think we're looking more broadly across just all the stuff developers need to build products. So as an example, we built a product that we shipped about a year and a half ago called Radar. And Radar, we built it as sort of a security layer. It helps detect fraud and abuse. So, it detects if someone's trying to sign in or use a password that's been in like a hacked database. So in that case, you should block it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of has this real time, updating nature to it. It also can detect if like there's brute force attempts, or you have two people trying to use the same account, or someone just like signed in California and then two minutes later they sign in Russia. It's called too fast to travel. Probably not the same person, right? So it does all
Mm-hmm.
this like detection around account takeover and fraud. What we found after shipping it and working with customers like Cursor is there's all this fraud around AI stuff. So people trying to get free Cursor accounts and use the inference endpoint and use it for all this like non-code authoring stuff. And so we've expanded beyond just authentication into all these other different modules and components that I think you need just to build SaaS, just to build software. And every business that has a freemium motion has some type of fraud, some type of like abuse as part of it. And if you're giving away tokens in some way, you definitely get it. You get it. It attracts it. It's like ants getting attracted to food. They'll
Mm-hmm.
eat your free tokens. About 6 months ago, we shipped a new product called Pipes, which you mentioned, which is an integrations product. And so it helps you plug in not just authentication systems, but data systems. So if you're building an app where you need to connect it to GitHub and HubSpot and Salesforce and Google Drive and Slack and Airtable and like whatever, it does all this stuff for you. It's called Pipes because it's kind of like plumbing, connecting stuff together. And the reason we built it was this observation that the previous era of software, most developers only had like a few integrations you would need. But now in the era of AI and like agentic workflows and people building agents themselves, agents are only valuable if they can connect to all your stuff,
Right.
right? Like an agent needs context. And MCP is a piece of this for the authentication layer, but it needs to get the data into the agent to be able to make decisions and have context to be able to reason. And so it's really like a data integration platform is what Pipes is for. It's to get data into your application that you're building so it has that knowledge and that context and the permissions to be able to do actions. So you want input and output on the actions that come out from it.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. The point though is that all these systems, they kind of expect trust, especially if you want to run, like, agents are really truly useful only if they can make autonomous decisions, right? So how do you envision that trust layer to walk through?
Yeah, we need to rebuild pretty much everything for permissions for agents, which sounds unfortunate, but is actually quite exciting. I mean, it's very interesting to build. We have a product that does fine-grained permissions, granular permissions
Mm-hmm.
for applications. The problem is that if you have a traditional kind of conventional software product, you can actually statically analyze the code and look at what it's trying to do, like look at what method function calls it has, and then from that build the list of permissions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can bake those permissions into like some type of, verifiable credential, and then say, okay, this process gets this, signed JWT and it's going to pass it along and I'm going to verify it. And that's why I can have a least privileges model, if you're familiar with that from kind of Unix philosophy and security methodologies. That's the typical way that people do permissions. And the reason why you can do that is because the code is declarative and the way it executes is, consistent and known. It's
Mm-hmm.
deterministic. Agents throw all that out the window. If you're running an agent, it's not deterministic. You can't predict the behavior. You certainly can't statically analyze what it's going to go do, right? It's sometimes different depending on the time of day or
Yeah.
how it's running, right?
Yeah.
Your temperature setting, whatever you have on it. And so you don't necessarily know for this agent, what do I need to grant it access to? The way that you define the permission set is as it executes, it needs the ability to increase its scopes, increase its access as it goes. And people see this today by using Claude code. If you run Claude in normal mode, it gets frustrating pretty quick because it keeps asking you things. Can I run Git in this folder? You're like, yeah, obviously. Can I
Yeah.
access this? Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I go search the web? You're like, oh, yeah, fine. And then people are eventually just like, screw it, dangerously skip permissions.
Yeah.
YOLO mode,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Codex. Because this progressive disclosure of permissions is exhausting to continuously approve, right? That's the permissioning model, though, that agents have. And the crazy thing is, it doesn't even work with the way they have it set today, because as you progressively say yes I'm going to allow you to access the web. You actually might not want to. You might only want it to access the web in that moment, but not forever have web access.
Right.
And so for a long running Claude session, what you're actually doing in normal mode is just accumulating a set of permissions. They don't actually attenuate or get scoped back down
Hmm.
unless you're approving every single one individually,
Yeah.
looking at every single one. And so we totally need a different permissioning system in this. And it can't be something that's approved every step of the way manually as a person, human in the loop. It also can't be YOLO.
Yeah.
It can't be dangerous. What's in the middle? And I think ultimately, like what needs to be in the middle is something where there's some Leviathan, some like permissioning layer that is trusted, that has an encapsulation of the intent of what you're trying to accomplish. And it's
Hmm.
able to reason and make permission decisions as the agent is executing and work in tandem to make sure it's secure. Because the agent itself, you might not want to bake in all the security concerns around it, because the agent's job is to solve the task. Like my favorite mental representation of an agent executing is Mr. Meeseeks from Rick and Morty. If
Hmm.
you know Mr. Meeseeks, you hit the box and he pops up and he's
Yeah.
blue and he's like, "I'm Mr. Meeseeks." Like, and his only job is to do whatever you're trying to get solved. Doesn't think about anything else, right? And then once he's solved, he's poof, he's done. You need something to look after that. You need something that can actually apply the permissioning and the constraints and
Hmm.
have sort of a security boundary around that. So the agent can just focus on the execution, in the kind of like, think about your weight activation. The attention can only be focused on that problem solving for the highest level of, reasoning. But then there's some exterior boundary that's, verifying its checks. And it's kind of like what a manager would do,
Yeah.
right? It's like kind of what a person would do. Like imagine you hire a consultant or an intern and you say, go solve this problem and run through walls, and I'm going to pay you, $1 million if you solve it or something. That person's going to keep coming back to you, and you're going to have to approve or deny or move stuff around or give them permissions. So you kind of need like a permissions agent. So I think actually the solution here to the agent security issue, because when we talk about agent auth, it's identity. What's the identity of the agent? That's pretty easy. You just stamp it with an identity. But it's authorization. It's actually access control and permissions under it. I think what we actually need there is something that has more intelligence baked in, so it can be reasoning as it's running. The idea of static permissions for an agent is just not going to work, or it's going to be
Hmm.
too restrictive. It might be able to work a little bit for just a little while for a certain task for one specific little thing, but today we have long running agents already,
Yeah.
which is incredible, right? We already have agents that can run for minutes or hours or days, literally on stuff. And what you absolutely do not want is a long running agent accumulating a large set of permissions over a long period of time and then having that be like a risk vector for what that agent does at the very end of its execution, right? You kind of want, it to be attenuated down as it's going or be checked on top with some type of permissioning agent. So um, I think there's a lot to learn from the existing permission systems that are out there. The fundamentals of how relationships between entities are structured and how you apply permissions and how you do verification and checking. You want some type of formal layer below that can be reasoned about. That's structure. That's like a data structure. Like doing
Hmm.
it purely in natural language, it's like not great, because risks around hallucination or prompt injection or other types of attacks. But I think you need this idea of more of like a squishy permission set where it sort of defines the nature of it, and and it's able to adapt and adjust. And in situations where it's unsure, then it can prompt you as the human. It can say, you told this agent to go do this stuff. This is what you said it could have access to, but the agent is insisting that it really needs to do this thing. Can I give it permission to do this one thing? And so
Hmm.
it's this collaboration between human and machine and the agent working. I think that's, however we end up building that, that will be the model, of how this works long term.
So that's kind of the agent experience that you're building, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, everything is agent
Yeah.
experience. We have this. I mean, as an aside from this, we have this super cool other thing we shipped. It's an installer that uses AI.
Hmm.
It's so cool. You run npx workOS, and it just uses Claude and skills and everything to like looks at your code base, does a full configuration of our backend. You can run it in non-interactive mode, and so an agent can do it end to end. We're actually shipping something this week, so it'll be live by the time this podcast airs. That allows the agent to go register without you involved. It's
Wow.
pretty cool. Like the agent can sign up for workOS without you being involved at all. And you as a human later can kind of claim that environment and that configuration. And so we're building everything for this future of agents. I've even joked with our team that we should just delete our docs because who reads the docs?
Yeah.
Not me, not
I was
humans.
talking to Avi from Mastra
Oh
here
yeah.
earlier, and he told me it's not a secret. He gave it away on a talk, so I guess I can talk about it. That they're putting all their docs into the npm packages.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
actually talked to them about
uh,
this. The benefit of doing that over over skills
mhm.
or over having like an MCP server for docs or something. We've tried all of them, but I think this is the way it's going to be in the future. This modality of building things for agent workflows and agents building
Mhm.
things. People will still be involved, you know, but it'll be kind of like like with airplanes, like jets when they fly like commercial airliners.
Mhm.
The autopilot flies the plane for almost all the time. But people take over, in certain scenarios. People are there's people that are taking off and landing. They're doing the most sensitive operations, but the rest of the time in
Mhm.
navigation, in route navigation, it's the autopilot that's running it. And I think that's going to be the way that the world works and engineers work. We'll still be involved, we'll still be making decisions, we'll still be thinking about the high level things, but we won't be dealing with the lower level pieces. And that'll be an emotional transition to go through as engineers, especially if you've associated your identity with the previous way of working. Um, there's a lot of people in consternation in the world previously around managing memory.
Yeah.
You know,
The rustification of the web as well.
absolutely.
That trend is there.
Absolutely, and the folks that think you should manually manage your memory and build ultra high performance C++ systems and all of that,
Mm.
they're still around, but they tend
Yeah.
not to be building today with the latest bleeding edge stuff, with the highest, leverage things. They're not building the web, they're not building experiences, they're building low level systems. And so I I think it's all going to be additive. I think that's kind of going back to what I was saying around zero sum. Some people think we're going to be replacing things. I think it's not that. We're adding it. It's like anytime you have a city, it's just layers.
Mm.
You go back to like here, right where we are in San Francisco, this area kind of like, south of Market, close to Mission Bay. I don't know if you know this, but underground, when they build the buildings here, they often find boats. They
Mm.
find ships because this used to be part of the harbor.
Right.
And they would park the ships in here and they would bury them and build stuff on top. And so when they build these giant skyscrapers and they have to dig down, they actually find old ships. Yeah. There's a bar around the corner here called the Old Ship Saloon, I think, and it's
I
because
do know it. Yeah, I've been there.
it's an old ship. Yeah, and so it's all layers, and what we'll have with this new level of AI coding or agentic systems or,
Mhm.
reading the docs or not. It's not that we're gonna be deleting things, it's we're gonna continue to be layering on top. And we just haven't had a high growth period for a long period of time. Like
You don't think so?
software engineering up until like about 18 months ago was nearly identical to me to what I did 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Felt almost the same. And we're still building stuff in that way. I mean, people there's a lot of stuff where it's like a Ruby on Rails app connected to a MySQL database and it runs on horizontally scaled and like that's it. And that is totally a fine way of like architecting web applications. But that
Mhm.
was kind of like the way stuff was built. You could use Python, you could use, Java or, Node.js or something. But even that, it's like the same thing. Like even I remember the Jamstack. I was like, this is kind of the same thing as the lamp stack, It's
Mhm.
like saying it in the same way. It's like just swapping in individual stuff and, different database, okay,
Yeah.
different, but it's the same components. Practically speaking, like web engineering, I think hadn't changed an enormous amount. We'd figured out how to
Yeah.
scale it. More people had gotten stuff. We got, mobile devices and we got like applications built on top. It was kind of similar,
Mhm.
relational databases and layers on top. I think what's happening with AI is this huge leap forward. It's this huge transformation. It's like the Cambrian era had this explosion of biodiversity that came out through evolution. I think we're going to be having something very similar for software. And to me, that's incredibly exciting. Like I think it can be intimidating and kind of scary because it's
Yeah.
uncertain.
Not only uncertain. I mean, every day you look into the news and you see another headline, maybe a YouTuber trying to get you on clickbait, but maybe also a valid reason for saying software engineering is dead or we're all going to be replaced. It's over. What do you recommend to a junior, a mid-level, a senior engineer who is maybe not working for a company like OpenAI or yours to stay relevant and stay ahead?
Well, all of the best talent should come work at WorkOS. Of course, don't join OpenAI. No, that's a joke. They're great. It's very hard to like manage your own psyche through a period like this. I think that's probably the thing a lot of people are struggling with the most. It's, adopting the tools, learning the tools is challenging because it's like every week there's like another thing. But generally that's like kind of exciting as well. You're like, if you're a tinkerer, you're like, oh, let me try something new. Um, I think people also have to remember to go back and try things they already tried because they get better with the models. That's a weird
Mhm.
new thing. It used to be you could try a product and it sucks and like, oh, okay, it's
That's
not
it.
going to get that much better. Now you try something and like a month later, it's like 10 times better because the models get better. Um, so it certainly is exhausting to stay on top of this stuff. I think there's a lot of people, myself included, who have like pulled back their time investment in like other hobbies or other things just to fully saturate on what's happening in the world right now because it is changing so quickly. Um, and it's useful to understand how it's changing so you can be part of that transformation and not just like check in every month, but sort of know the lineage of how it moved. Like, um, it feels it to some degree like we're all watching the same TV show a little bit too, like
Mhm.
living on X. Um, Getting upset about it though, like getting doomer mindset, like, oh, I'm cooked, my job is toast, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, it's easy to fall into that trap if you have this zero sum mindset. And there are certainly people that promote that because it gets clicks online. It gets in the news generally, like just mainstream media, 24-hour cable TV, cable news, like making people feel bad draws people in, or scared or worrisome. And so that same dynamic exists during any transition in the world, and it exists for this thing in technology. And what I would just encourage people to do is like, if they feel like that, um, is just to like try to put that feeling on the shelf and think about like the possibility of abundance out of this. And I mean abundance in the like way we're creating software and the possibility to make stuff. And just try that on and just try to sit with that for a while because you can kind of choose which way you're gonna go on this. It's like the meme of the guy on the train, like looking at the dreary side or the bright side. You can
Mhm.
choose which side of the train you sit on. And the train's gonna go the same place no matter where you're sitting. It's gonna end up at the same place. I'm not gonna go impact how fast we get GPT-6 necessarily. I'm not an AI researcher. Maybe there's some people that are like ultimately at the edge of their field, doing this, but
Mhm.
I think there's so much momentum in this. It's gonna happen. It's gonna go. And so you can kind of choose like, do I want to be part of what's this societal change, this technology change? Do I want to experience this through the lens of optimism?
Mhm.
Or do I want to experience this through the lens of doomerism and pessimism? Just choose which one. And if you don't think you can choose, I encourage you to read like about like cognitive behavioral psychology and a lot of stuff around that
Mhm.
because you actually can. You actually can kind of like teach your mind, to react in certain ways. You can teach your kind of like cerebral state to have certain type of emotional reactions depending on certain situations. A lot of this is like through meditation and other things, but you can choose, how your perspective, your attitude, and I think that is just about the only choice people can make in their life. Is like truly, you can't choose what situation you're in necessarily. You can't choose what happens to you. You can't, choose the events in the world. You can only choose like how you're going to think about them and how you will react to them. Your own internally consistency.
So in this case, we're as a software engineer now, I should choose optimism and then fully immerse myself.
And isn't that a better way to live?
Mhm.
Like, isn't that going to be a
Truly.
better just like way for you to experience your life and day to day and your happiness and like, you know, um, I don't think we're heading towards catastrophe. Not with this, at least. There's other things in the world that are true terrible situations that are towards catastrophe. This is not one of them. This is like the idea of like, oh, AI is going to like write all the code for me, so I can't write code. I'm sorry, that is not a crisis of that type of scale of proportions. People aren't dying. You know, uh, uh, you'll just need to change the way you work in your job. And I think trying
Mhm.
to approach that from the perspective of like what an exciting time to live through as like a gift to have in your career, to be at this transformative moment during this technology change.
Mhm.
Like, I did not get to I mean, I lived through the internet transition. I did not professionally work through that. I wasn't like an engineer at Borland in like 1995
Yeah,
and then saw the emergence of the internet, and then like, I was like riding my skateboard around and stuff as a kid.
but you're here now.
Yeah, but I'm here now. And so I get to be part of this transition. And I think that trying to approach it as like this exciting moment that you get to engage with the world and that it's not something, if you work a lot, maybe it's okay to work a lot for a while in your career. If it's really important, it's the exciting moment, when everything gets invented. Like maybe
Mhm.
that's the time that's actually like interesting to dig in. And if people are like criticizing people for doing that or saying like, why would you spend all this time working? Like, it's okay to be obsessed about the things that you care about, you think are meaningful. I think that's
Mhm.
fine. It's one of the reasons I like San Francisco is it's a city full of like
Obsessed people.
we're all lunatics. It's like it's okay to be obsessed about whatever
Yeah.
you want and be super into it.
So are you an optimist regarding the potential, I want to say this in the appropriate term, but risk of AI?
I think there are real risks around it because it's an extremely powerful technology. I think
Mhm.
it's like, people compare it a little bit to like nuclear weapons, but I think it's
Mhm.
actually very different. Very, very different because it's very hard to build a nuclear weapon. It's like, it's like at least as far as I know, it's really complicated to do. You have to do big machines and all these materials, these exotic materials and things. But AI will have like the model weights. You could put on a thumb drive and carry around,
Mhm.
right? And so I think there are risks associated with it, especially based on its impact to society and how governments will use it and what it will enable like small groups of people to be able to do in the world. But I think it's worth it. Like the benefits for it are truly enormous, transformative in a way I think we haven't even really grokked yet. And there are a significant number of people that are worried about alignment, that are worried about the risks and concerns around it, including the government. You know, the government's on the same page, around this being a thing that they're very seem to be quite careful around. Like we don't want to overregulate it, but we also don't want it to be like export it to everyone in the world. We want it to be like
Mhm.
something that we actually understand. We work on understanding it more and more. And so I would say I am an optimist about that. People are taking it seriously. Um, if it was something where there wasn't like a giant positive effect on it, I think this is the thing with kind of like nuclear weapons is we didn't get like amazing nuclear energy out of it.
Mm-mm.
You know,
Not yet.
if we had gotten that, if we had like power that was too cheap to meter because of the Cold War, maybe that would have been a better trade.
Mhm.
But instead, we just have this like mutually assured destruction thing in the world and like
Yeah.
this fear of it. We didn't really get the benefit from it. I think with AI, what we're seeing is we're getting the benefit first. We're getting the automation and the ability to build stuff, and we're getting the components that make it easier to create things much faster earlier in the cycle. And we just need to make sure that the risk profile associated with it around a runaway case
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't.
you're part of the solution, I would say, in some extent, because you're working on pieces like authentication and permissions. Don't you think that people have merit who talk about surveillance risks with the use of AI?
It's a great question. I mean, any type of thing that can do like wide scale data processing can be used for surveillance. We already had a lot of problems with that in America, with like the Snowden leaks and the PRISM program and like all this stuff. And the government like, was kind of caught doing this and like
Mhm.
people demanded changes and those changes were made. Um, so it's an amplification of that we already had. I don't think it's like necessarily a new thing. It's just at a wider scale than what
Right.
we were doing already. So not to say it's not concerning, but it's just
Mhm.
not a novel, in my mind, like a novel threat. It's a continuation of existing threat. I think in particular, the ability to have like wide scale surveillance in countries that already have like limited rights is a bigger concern for me than in America. Like I think in America, like you know, we screw up a lot, but like there's kind of this system to push back on it and people can protest and make their demands met. And generally the government like folds to the will of the people. But that is not the case in a lot of other countries. So I'm actually more concerned about it elsewhere globally if it becomes, something that governments are using in more autocratic nations. But I think it is a risk. The decision of like Anthropic and Dario selling to the government versus OpenAI not, that is above like my way above my pay grade to be able to make that
Mhm.
type of a call. You can see merits for both arguments. and we're not in a situation where we're doing that too. So I
Yeah.
had to
What does that
approach it.
future look like for you in which we, things go as well as they could? Where do we end
I
up?
think just like more software in the world gets built than ever before, and ideally we help developers do it faster with
Yeah.
WorkOS.
What does that software look like?
WorkOS is really about helping people get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
Get stuff done at work. Where people don't build, social networks or games or consumer products on us. If you're building like a food delivery app, um, probably not, the platform for you. But we like to help people get stuff done, like knowledge workers. And I think, um, the things that agents need to do inside of environments with workplaces or inside of, companies are very similar to what people do. Agents are sort of like a form of digital people
Mm-hmm.
doing things. We'll collaborate with agents. And so a lot of the things we've already built are very applicable to agentic systems. And I want all of that stuff I was describing around the acceleration around software for agents. I want to have that happen faster because I think it's going to be really valuable to the world and happen in a way that can be trusted and secure. Because I don't want people to build stuff and have this experience where they try it and they're like,
Ah,
oh, the agent ran away and deleted a bunch of stuff
yeah.
or had the wrong permissions or we got hacked because we were trying the new shiny AI thing. It's really important that when people try this stuff, it lives up to its expectation and it's secure. And I think that's our job as part of it, to be the best platform for developers building that stuff. And for developers, whatever the word developer means in the future,
Yeah.
whoever calls himself a developer or wants to build something, we want to welcome them and be a platform for them to create on top of.
That's awesome. Well, with that being said, I think this has been a wonderful conversation, Michael.
Thanks for having me. This
Yeah,
is great.
it was absolutely fantastic. I have a little tradition that I close every episode with. I have a round of, I think, 3 rapid fire questions
All right, let's do it.
that I ask everyone to close it up. Can you tell us your favorite programming language?
Oh, man, I think still TypeScript. I picked TypeScript as the singular language WorkOS would be built in, both front
Mm-hmm.
and back end, very, very early on, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And that's just turned out to be a fantastic choice. I think it just the language designers were great. My first love was like building stuff kind of really in Python, but really before that, kind of in like Perl or PHP,
Mm-hmm.
like many, many moons ago. But I think TypeScript, it just kind of keeps getting better and better. And it's cool that like AI is really good at writing TypeScript today.
Yeah, that's true. I think we just talked about Avi and Master folks. So it seems like a lot more people are building now agentic systems in TypeScript, which previously was more like the LangChain road, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. What is are you an IDE or a CLI guy?
Both to some degree. I mean, I use Cursor a lot.
Uh-huh.
I have not used that much Cursor this year. But I try different stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
the way I build stuff today is every weekend I try to pick a new stack and build something new because the tools are changing so fast. And my goal is not to just build the thing; it's to learn like where things are going. So the
We
latest
find
thing,
you at some hackathons here around the Bay Area
occasionally,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The latest thing I built was something with Conductor, which is like pretty sweet. It's kind
Wow.
of like, I don't know if you've used it. You can use different models and it has like very interesting workflows for doing like code review, but it's a prompt first, type of IDE, and it's
Very
pretty
cool.
sweet.
Last question, or second last maybe. Favorite AI model?
The new
Hmm.
5.3 Codex high reasoning stuff is
Yeah.
really good. It's really, really good. I love the Claude model. The Claude models feel better to use.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't know how to describe it. It's like like the Porsche 911, that car.
Mm-hmm.
I drove one once. It feels really good to drive, but it's actually like a terribly designed car from like a dynamics, like actual
Mm-hmm.
traction dynamics perspective. Like like the way the center of weight is compared to where the wheels are, it can spin out really easily. But it's like more fun to drive because of it. There's something about like the Claude, the Opus models that are like this a little bit for me. So
Ah.
I find that when I'm just wanting to like vibe and have a good experience, I'm using a
Yeah.
lot of stuff from Anthropic. But if there's like a really hard specific program problem I'm trying to solve or reason about, I actually like use the Codex models and now like GPT 5.3,
Yeah, I can totally
5.4.
relate to that
Yeah.
experience. Okay, great. Very last question. I think Michael, you had an amazing career as an entrepreneur, programmer, software engineer, product engineer, maybe. what is one piece of advice you would give to an rising founder in the audience for building a successful company with product market fit?
Yeah. Something I wish I would have internalized maybe earlier in my career is that like everything is learnable, which sounds like a bit obvious to say if you just kind of articulate it like that. But I grew up in this kind of small town in Oregon, and then as a computer science student, and I kind of like boxed myself in a little bit, where I was like, okay, I know how to do these things, or the
Mhm.
way other people defined me was like, oh, you are this, you are an engineer.
Mhm.
And I think especially in starting a company, that can be like self-limiting in that you believe like, oh, I'm an engineer, I need to hire someone to do the business stuff. Or I need to hire someone to do design, or I need to hire a PR person to do PR, or I need to hire a marketing person to do marketing. Um, and you can get into this mindset of like effectively like low agency. Like the way I solve problems needs to be through giving it to other people because I couldn't have that capability because I am this and not that.
Mhm.
And in practice, that's not actually true. I find it can be challenging to learn stuff. It can be hard. You can suck at it initially. Um, but if you figure out like how to actually pursue like the acquisition of knowledge and skills and do it in a structured, repeatable way, you actually can become quite good at many things very quickly. And I find this also when I hire people that like typically people when they're good at one thing, like really good at one thing, they're usually very good at multiple things.
Mhm.
It's
Makes
like they're very
sense.
spiky in a lot of places.
I guess people with high agency, they will not wait. They will just do things
They'll
that,
just figure it out.
yeah.
It's like that you can just do things meme. And so I think there's an element of that where, especially in the entrepreneurial role, it's essential that you figure out how to do a lot of different things to be successful. And the sooner you can just chase that. A lot of young people just like don't have that voice in the head. They're just like, just go figure it out. They just go do it.
Mhm.
But for whatever reason, from my own background, I spent a good number of years like believing there were certain things that I wouldn't be good at doing, and as soon as I actually approached learning them, I actually became quite good at them very quickly, and then I just progressed in my career what I could accomplish, and I wish I would have done some of those things sooner.
So to summarize it, for anybody trying to start a company, don't let your alter ego get in your way.
My favorite slogan of all time is Nike. Just do it. I would add one thing to it. I'd say just effing do it.
All right. With that, we'll
Just
close here.
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Thanks a lot.
yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and good, appreciate it.
Thanks.